The flood of knowledge was overwhelming. Mathematical concepts that had no names in human language poured into Janice's consciousness, along with images of technologies that seemed to border on magic. She could see fusion reactors the size of buildings that could power entire continents, spacecraft that folded space around themselves to cross impossible distances in moments, and computer systems that appeared to be grown rather than built. But more than just technical specifications, she was receiving understanding. The underlying principles that made these technologies possible, the physics that humanity had only glimpsed at the edges of their most advanced theories. Quantum mechanics revealed layers of complexity that her species had never suspected, while the relationship between consciousness and the structure of reality itself became startlingly clear. "Too much," she gasped, feeling as if her brain might burst from the pressure of absorbing so much information. "The integration will take time," the being explained, its touch remaining steady on her forehead. "Your neural patterns are being modified to accommodate the new knowledge. When you return to your people, you will find that you understand things you did not learn, can solve problems you have never studied." The download continued for what felt like hours. Janice saw civilizations that had transcended the need for physical bodies, existing as pure consciousness within vast computer networks. She witnessed species that had learned to manipulate matter at the quantum level, reshaping reality itself to suit their needs. And underlying it all was a sense of profound unity, the understanding that consciousness was the universe's way of experiencing itself. When the flow of information finally stopped, Janice found herself changed. She could feel new neural pathways in her brain, connections that hadn't existed before. Mathematical relationships that had seemed impossibly complex now appeared elegant and simple. The workings of quantum mechanics, previously mysterious, now made intuitive sense. "The knowledge is vast," the being warned. "Do not attempt to share everything at once. Your species must be prepared gradually, or they will reject the information as impossible." "How do I know what to share and when?" "Trust your instincts. The integration process includes guidelines for responsible disclosure. Start with those who are already pushing the boundaries of human understanding, your physicists, your engineers, your philosophers." The chamber around them had continued to change during the knowledge transfer. The other beings had departed, leaving only Janice and her primary contact. The walls now showed views of space, and she could see the Prometheus still attached to the alien vessel's hull. "It's time for you to go," the being said. "Your species' trial period begins now." "Wait," Janice said, struggling to organize her thoughts around the vast amount of new information in her head. "What happens if we fail? What did you mean about ensuring our influence doesn't spread?" The being's response carried overtones of regret. "Quarantine. Your solar system would be isolated from the rest of the galaxy until your species either achieves transcendence or destroys itself naturally. And if we prove to be actively dangerous, then more direct intervention would become necessary." The implications were terrifying. These beings had the power to either elevate humanity to unimaginable heights or ensure that humans never threatened anyone else. The responsibility of carrying this knowledge back to Earth felt crushing. "How many other species are currently undergoing this trial?" she asked. "In this galaxy? Perhaps a dozen. Most fail within the first few decades." "What's the most common cause of failure?" "Fear. When a species first encounters truly advanced technology, their usual response is to weaponize it. They focus on how the new capabilities can be used to defeat their enemies rather than how they can be used to transcend the need for enemies entirely." Janice thought about Earth's military-industrial complex, about the arms races that had defined much of human history. Would her species be able to break that pattern when presented with technologies that could remake civilization? "There's something else you should know," the being continued. "You are not the first human to visit this vessel." "What?" 3 of your people have achieved quantum consciousness spontaneously, a very rare occurrence. They have been in communication with us for some time, preparing for this moment." "Who? Where are they?" "That knowledge is not for you to possess. When the time is right, they will reveal themselves and assist in the transition. Until then, they maintain their positions within your society, preparing the way. The thought that other humans had already achieved the kind of transcendence these beings represented was both comforting and unsettling. Did they still consider themselves human? Were they alive, or had they moved beyond such concepts? The wall nearest to Janice began to iris open, revealing the corridor she had used to enter the chamber. "Go now," the being said. "Share what you have learned wisely. The next 50 years will determine whether your species joins the community of consciousness or becomes another failed experiment. Will I see you again? If your species succeeds, yes. If not." The being's response carried overtones of finality. Janice moved toward the opening, then paused. "What should I call you?" "Your species, I mean. We have moved beyond the need for names, but your linguists might translate our designation as the gardeners. We tend the garden of consciousness, helping it grow where possible." As she passed through the opening, Janice felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She was carrying the future of humanity in her altered neural patterns, knowledge that could either save her species or provide them with more efficient means of self-destruction. The journey back through the ship's corridors seemed different now. The flowing patterns on the walls made sense to her, revealing themselves as complex mathematical equations that described the relationship between consciousness and reality. She could understand the ship's impossible geometry, seeing how it folded space to create internal dimensions larger than its external volume. When she reached the hull breach where she had entered, the opening was still present, waiting for her return. As she stepped through into the vacuum of space, she felt the alien material begin to seal itself behind her. Within moments, the ship's hull was once again perfectly smooth and featureless. The Prometheus waited where she had left it, its familiar human technology now seeming crude and primitive compared to what she had just experienced. As she sealed herself into the shuttle and began the flight back to Luna Base, Janice realized that she was no longer entirely human herself. The knowledge the gardeners had shared had changed her on a fundamental level. The question now was whether she could use that change to help humanity make the greatest transition in its history, or whether she would be forced to watch her species fail the most important test they would ever face. The flight back to Luna Base passed in a blur of revelation and growing understanding. As the alien knowledge settled into Janice's consciousness, she began to perceive the universe around her with startling clarity. The quantum foam that permeated all space was visible to her now, a vast network of probability and potential that connected every particle in existence. She could see how the gardener's ship manipulated this underlying structure to achieve its impossible capabilities. But more disturbing was her growing awareness of Earth's precarious position. The planet's electromagnetic signature was visible to her enhanced perception, and she could see the harsh discord in its patterns. Nuclear weapons, industrial pollution, the chaotic energy of billions of minds focused on competition rather than cooperation. Humanity was broadcasting its lack of readiness for transcendence across the entire solar system. Luna Base appeared ahead, its familiar docking bays a welcome sight after the alien geometries of the Gardner vessel. As the Prometheus settled into its berth, Janice saw Commander Williams and Dr. Martinez waiting in the observation gallery. Their faces showed a mixture of relief and intense curiosity. She cycled through decontamination procedures, her mind racing as she tried to figure out how to explain what had happened. The knowledge in her head was so vast and complex that she wasn't sure human language could convey even a fraction of it. Worse, she was beginning to understand the gardener's warning about gradual disclosure. Too much information too quickly would either be dismissed as delusion or cause panic. "Captain Chin," Williams said as she emerged from the shuttle bay. "Thank God you're back. We lost contact 18 hours ago and were beginning to prepare a rescue mission." 18 hours? Janice checked her chronometer and was surprised to see that nearly a full day had passed. Her subjective experience aboard the alien vessel had felt like only a few hours at most. "The alien ship?" Dr. Martinez said, studying Janice's face intently. "Did you make contact?" "I did. And we need to talk. All of us. Immediately." Williams led them to the base's secure briefing room, activating privacy shields and recording systems. "Tell us everything," he said. Janice took a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts. They're called the gardeners. They're an ancient species that observes younger civilizations as they develop quantum consciousness. They've been watching humanity for millennia, but they only came close when our particle accelerator experiments began affecting quantum foam. She paused, seeing the skeptical expressions on their faces. Even her own words sounded fantastic to her, despite having lived through the experience. They're not invaders, she continued. They're evaluators. Humanity is undergoing a test, and the next 50 years will determine whether we join something called the Galactic Community or face quarantine. Quarantine? Williams leaned forward. What does that mean? Isolation from the rest of the galaxy until we either transcend our current limitations or destroy ourselves. Dr. Martinez activated her tablet and began taking notes. What are these limitations they're referring to? Our tendency toward conflict, our focus on competition rather than cooperation, our inability to see beyond immediate self-interest. Janice could feel the alien knowledge organizing itself in her mind, providing frameworks for understanding that she had never possessed before. Most species fail this test because they weaponize advanced technology instead of using it to transcend the need for weapons. And if we fail the test? Then they ensure our influence doesn't spread beyond our solar system. The implications hung heavy in the air. Williams was the first to speak. What would it take to pass this test? Unity of purpose. The development of technologies that could end resource conflicts and enable interstellar travel. But most importantly, the wisdom to use those technologies responsibly. Do they provide guidance? Janice hesitated, remembering the gardener's warning about careful disclosure. They've shared certain mathematical foundations. Information that could help us develop the necessary technologies. But the development must be organic. We have to evolve socially and philosophically along with our technological advancement. Dr. Martinez looked up from her notes. Captain, I need to ask this directly. Did they do something to you? You seem different. Janice had been expecting this question. The changes in her neural patterns were probably visible to anyone who knew her well. They integrated the mathematical knowledge into my memory patterns. I understand concepts now that I didn't learn through conventional means. Show us, Williams said. Janice walked to the briefing room's whiteboard and began writing equations. The mathematics flowed from her pen as naturally as breathing, complex quantum relationships that described how consciousness interacted with the fundamental structure of reality. The formulas seemed to write themselves, each symbol connecting to others in patterns that formed a coherent theory of everything. When she finished, both Williams and Dr. Martinez were staring at the board in stunned silence. The equations were unlike anything in current human physics, yet they had an elegance and completeness that suggested profound truth. This is, Dr. Martinez whispered. This could revolutionize our understanding of everything. It's just the beginning, Janice said. But we have to be careful how we share this information. Too much too quickly could cause more harm than good. Williams activated his communicator. I need to contact Earth Command immediately. This information needs to reach the Global Council. Wait, Janice said, feeling the alien knowledge providing guidance. We need to be strategic about this. The gardeners mentioned that there are already 3 humans who have achieved quantum consciousness naturally. They're positioned within our society, preparing for this moment. We should try to identify them before we make any official announcements. How do we do that? Start with our most advanced researchers in quantum physics and consciousness studies. Look for people who have made breakthrough discoveries that seem to come from nowhere, or who have been advocating for global cooperation in ways that seem unusually prescient. Dr. Martinez was already pulling up personnel files on her tablet. There are several candidates. Dr. Sarah Kim at the Quantum Research Institute has published papers that seem to anticipate discoveries we haven't made yet. Professor Michael O'Brien at the Global Philosophy Center has been advocating for consciousness-based governance for years. And there's Dr. Elena Vasquez at the CERN facility. She's been working on experiments that our physicists claim are impossible. Contact them, Janice said. Carefully. Use the phrase quantum gardening and see how they respond. Williams nodded grimly. And if they don't respond as expected? Then we proceed without them, but we'll need to be even more careful about how we release this information. Humanity's survival may depend on our ability to evolve socially as quickly as we develop technologically. As they began planning their next steps, Janice felt the weight of the gardener's knowledge pressing on her consciousness. Hidden within the mathematical frameworks were technologies that could transform human civilization, or destroy it completely. The choice of which path humanity would take was now partially in her hands. Looking out at Earth through Lunar Base's observation windows, she wondered if her species had the wisdom to make the right choices, or if she was about to watch the slow-motion extinction of everything she had ever known and loved. The test had begun, and the clock was ticking. 3 weeks after her return from the Gardner vessel, Janice found herself in a secure conference room at the Global Defense Council headquarters in Geneva. The response to her initial report had been exactly what she'd feared, a mixture of disbelief, panic, and immediate calls for military preparedness. "Let me understand this correctly," said General Morrison, the Council's military liaison. "You're telling us that humanity is being evaluated by alien beings who have the power to quarantine our entire solar system, and your recommendation is that we focus on peaceful development rather than defense preparations? General, any defensive measures we could develop would be useless against their technology," Janice replied patiently. She had been having this same argument for weeks. Their ship defied every known law of physics. They have capabilities we can't even properly comprehend. All the more reason to prepare for the worst-case scenario. Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had been quietly observing the debate from across the table, finally spoke up. "General Morrison, might I suggest that Captain Chen's approach is not just morally correct, but strategically sound as well?" Janice studied Vasquez carefully. The physicist had responded to their coded message with a simple reply. "The garden grows toward the light." Either she was one of the gardener's human contacts, or she was remarkably well informed about the situation. "Dr. Vasquez," Morrison said, "surely you can understand the need for defensive preparations. What I understand is that species who focus on weaponizing advanced technology typically fail the gardener's evaluation." Vasquez met Morrison's stare calmly. "And the consequences of failure extend beyond simple extinction." The room fell silent. Vasquez had just revealed knowledge that wasn't in any official report. "Dr. Vasquez," said Dr. Kim, the Council's science advisor, "how do you know about the gardener's evaluation process?" Vasquez smiled slightly. "Perhaps we should have this conversation privately." 2 hours later, Janice found herself in a smaller, even more secure room with Vasquez, Kim, and a man she didn't recognize who had been introduced simply as Dr. Michael. "There are actually 4 of us now," Vasquez explained. 3 who achieved quantum consciousness naturally, and you, who received the knowledge through direct transfer. "How long have you been in contact with the gardeners?" Janice asked. "I've been aware of them for about 7 years," Dr. Michael replied. His appearance was unremarkable, but when he spoke, Janice could sense something different about him, a depth that suggested his consciousness had expanded far beyond normal human parameters. "Sarah achieved contact 5 years ago, and Elena 3 years ago." Dr. Kim, apparently Sarah, nodded. "We've been working within the system, trying to prepare humanity for this moment. But progress has been, frustratingly slow. The problem," Elena said, "is that human institutions are designed around competition and scarcity. The technologies the gardeners have shared assume abundance and cooperation. It's like trying to explain quantum mechanics to someone who's never seen mathematics." Janice understood. The knowledge in her own head included technologies that could provide unlimited clean energy, but their development required unprecedented global cooperation. Countries would need to share resources and information freely, abandoning the competitive dynamics that had driven human development for millennia. "What about the other major powers?" she asked. "Russia, China, the European Union, are they even aware of the situation?" "The Global Council briefed them yesterday," Sarah replied grimly. "The responses have been predictable. Each nation wants exclusive access to any alien technology. Several are already beginning crash programs to develop space-based weapons. Which is exactly the wrong response, Michael said. The Gardeners are monitoring all of these activities. Every missile built, every weapon deployed, every act of aggression is being recorded as evidence of humanity's readiness level. Elena pulled out a tablet and displayed a series of complex readouts. We've been monitoring quantum resonance patterns around Earth. The planet's consciousness field is becoming increasingly discordant. If current trends continue, we'll fail the evaluation before we even begin to develop the necessary technologies. What would success look like? Janice asked. Global cooperation on an unprecedented scale, Sarah replied. The fusion reactor designs that are now part of your knowledge base require rare earth elements from at least 6 different continents. The quantum computing systems need manufacturing capabilities that no single nation possesses. And the consciousness integration technologies. She paused. What about them? They require a level of trust and openness that most humans aren't capable of yet. The artificial intelligences that will help manage an advanced civilization need to be developed by minds that have transcended individual ego. Janice felt a chill of understanding. You're talking about humans who have achieved the same kind of consciousness as the Gardeners. Not the same, Michael corrected. But similar. Quantum consciousness allows perception of the underlying unity of existence. When you truly understand that all consciousness is connected, competition becomes as meaningless as your left hand fighting your right hand. How many humans would need to achieve this level of consciousness? The Gardeners estimate that approximately 1% of the population would be sufficient to guide the transition, Elena said. But currently, only we 4 have achieved it naturally, and the traditional meditation and spiritual practices that might develop it take decades of dedication. There might be another way, Sarah said quietly. The consciousness integration technology includes methods for accelerating the development of quantum awareness. But it's dangerous. Forcing the transition too quickly can result in psychological fragmentation or complete ego dissolution. Janice thought about her own transformation aboard the Gardener vessel. The knowledge transfer had changed her on a fundamental level, but she still felt essentially human. What are you proposing? A carefully managed program to develop quantum consciousness in selected individuals, Michael explained. Scientists, philosophers, artists, leaders, people who are already pushing the boundaries of human understanding and who have demonstrated wisdom and emotional stability. And if it goes wrong? Then we lose some of the best minds of our generation and probably fail the evaluation anyway, Elena said bluntly. But without quantum-conscious humans to guide the development of advanced technologies, failure is almost certain. The room fell silent as they contemplated the magnitude of what they were discussing. They were talking about fundamentally altering human consciousness, creating a new kind of person who might serve as a bridge between humanity and the vast galactic community that awaited. We need to present this to the Global Council, Janice said finally. Do we? Sarah asked. Or do we proceed quietly, preparing a core group of transformed humans who can guide the species when the time is right? It was a question that cut to the heart of democracy and human self-determination. Did they have the right to make decisions that would affect the entire species without consultation? But could they risk the delays and conflicts that would inevitably arise from trying to build consensus among Earth's fractured political systems? The Gardeners gave us 50 years, Michael said. At the current rate of social evolution, humanity might be ready for the transition in 500 years. We need to accelerate the process, and that requires difficult choices. Janice looked around the table at her 3 companions, humans who had already moved beyond purely human consciousness, yet who still carried the responsibility of protecting their birth species. The weight of decision settled on her shoulders, as she realized that the next few months might determine whether humanity had any future at all. We'll need a plan, she said finally. Something that maximizes our chances of success while minimizing the risks of catastrophic failure. Already working on it, Elena said, pulling up new files on her tablet. But you're not going to like what it requires. The plan Elena outlined was ambitious to the point of seeming impossible. Over the following months, they would need to identify and carefully approach approximately 50 individuals worldwide, scientists, philosophers, artists, and leaders who showed both exceptional capability and the psychological stability necessary for consciousness transformation. The selection criteria are crucial, Michael explained as they reviewed candidate profiles. We need people who are already questioning the fundamental nature of reality, who have demonstrated the ability to think beyond conventional paradigms. The list they had compiled was diverse. A quantum physicist from Mumbai who had published papers on consciousness-based interpretations of quantum mechanics, a neuroscientist from Sao Paulo studying the relationship between meditation and brain plasticity, a composer from Vienna whose music seemed to tap into mathematical relationships that shouldn't be audible to human ears. What about political leaders? Janice asked, studying the profiles. We'll need people in positions of authority to implement the changes necessary for species survival. Sarah shook her head. Most political leaders are selected for their ability to work within existing systems. The kind of consciousness transformation we're talking about often makes traditional political power structures seem irrelevant. Then how do we change human society? From the bottom up, Elena replied. We create a network of transformed individuals who begin implementing the new technologies and social structures on a small scale. As their success becomes evident, the larger society will naturally begin to adopt their approaches. It was a bold strategy, but Janice could see the logic. Trying to convince existing power structures to abandon the competitive dynamics that had brought them to power would be nearly impossible. But demonstrating that cooperation and abundance were achievable might gradually shift global consciousness. What about the timeline? She asked. The gardeners said 50 years, but you're talking about a transformation that could take decades just to begin. Michael pulled up a different set of displays. That's where the acceleration technology comes in. The consciousness transformation process can be reduced from decades to months, but only for individuals who are already predisposed to the change. What kind of predisposition? High levels of creativity, the ability to think in abstract mathematical terms, experience with altered states of consciousness through meditation or other practices, and most importantly, a genuine concern for the welfare of others rather than purely personal advancement. Janice studied the candidate profiles more carefully. Many of them had backgrounds in both science and contemplative practices, researchers who had studied meditation, artists who incorporated mathematical principles into their work, philosophers who had explored the relationship between consciousness and reality. How do we approach them? She asked. Carefully, Sarah replied. We start with informal contact, discussing ideas that edge toward the truth without revealing everything at once. We look for individuals who respond with genuine interest rather than skepticism or fear. And if they're interested, then we invite them to participate in what we'll describe as an advanced consciousness research program. Only after they've committed to the process do we reveal the full scope of what we're doing. Elena activated a secure communication system. We've already begun with some of the most promising candidates. Dr. Yuki Tanaka from the Tokyo Institute of Technology has agreed to participate in what she thinks is a study of enhanced cognitive states. Professor James Wellington from Oxford believes he's volunteering for research into the relationship between consciousness and quantum mechanics. How many have agreed so far? 12, Michael replied. All of them are individuals who are already pushing the boundaries of their fields. The transformation process seems to work best with minds that are already operating at the edges of conventional understanding. Janice felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. They were essentially conducting an unauthorized experiment on human consciousness, trying to create a new kind of person capable of guiding the species through its greatest transition. The potential benefits were enormous, but so were the risks. What about safeguards? She asked. What happens if the transformation process goes wrong? We've developed protocols based on the gardener's knowledge, Sarah explained. The process is gradual, monitored constantly, and can be halted if we detect signs of psychological instability. But I won't lie to you, there are risks. We could damage brilliant minds, or create individuals who are so far beyond normal human consciousness that they can't relate to the rest of our species. Have you tested the process? The three transformed humans exchanged glances. "We are the test," Michael said quietly. "Each of us underwent the transformation using slightly different methods. We're studying our own psychological and neurological changes to refine the process for others. And the results? Enhanced pattern recognition, the ability to perceive quantum-level relationships, increased empathy and concern for collective welfare, and a sense of connection to something much larger than individual existence," Elena replied. "But also a growing sense of isolation from normal human consciousness. It's like seeing in color when everyone around you is colorblind." Janice understood. Her own partial transformation had given her glimpses of what they were describing. The mathematical knowledge the gardeners had shared sometimes felt like a beautiful symphony that only she could hear. "There's something else we need to discuss," Sarah said, pulling up a new set of displays. "The gardeners aren't the only observers of human development." "What do you mean?" "Other species are watching as well. Some of them see humanity's aggressive tendencies as a potential threat to galactic stability. If we fail the gardener's evaluation, these other species might decide that direct intervention is necessary." The displays showed radio telescope data from around the world, revealing patterns of electromagnetic activity that suggested multiple artificial sources beyond the solar system. "How many are out there?" Janice asked. "At least 6 distinct signatures," Michael replied. "The gardeners represent what we might call the intervention faction, species that believe in helping younger civilizations transcend their limitations. But there are also what we might call the containment faction, species that prefer to eliminate potential threats before they can spread." "And the quarantine faction?" "That's actually the gardener's compromise position. Better to isolate a potentially dangerous species than to destroy them, but not so permissive as to let them threaten others." Janice felt the full weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Humanity wasn't just being tested by benevolent observers, they were being evaluated by a galactic community that included species willing to destroy entire civilizations to protect their own interests. "How long do we have before these other factions might act?" "Unknown," Elena replied. "But the mathematical models suggest that if humanity begins developing interstellar capabilities without achieving consciousness transformation, intervention becomes increasingly likely. So we're racing against multiple deadlines." "Yes. We need to transform enough human consciousness to guide the species toward cooperation and transcendence, develop the technologies necessary for a post-scarcity civilization, and do it all before we advance far enough to be seen as a threat by other galactic species." Janice looked around the table at her companions, 3 humans who had already moved beyond purely human consciousness, planning the salvation or transformation of their entire species. The magnitude of what they were attempting was staggering, but the alternative was potentially the end of human civilization. "When do we begin the acceleration program?" she asked. "We already have," Michael replied. "The first candidate undergoes consciousness transformation tomorrow." 6 months later, Janice stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Harmony Station, orbiting Earth at the L5 Lagrange point. The station was one of 12 similar facilities that had been built using technologies derived from the Gardner knowledge: fusion reactors that provided unlimited clean energy, quantum computers that managed resources with unprecedented efficiency, and manufacturing systems that seemed to blur the line between technology and biology. The transformation program had been more successful than they had dared hope. Of the 50 candidates they had initially identified, 43 had successfully undergone consciousness expansion. These individuals now formed the core of a growing network of transformed humans who were quietly revolutionizing human civilization from within. "The latest reports from the surface are encouraging," said Dr. Elena Vasquez, joining Janice at the observation window. Elena's appearance hadn't changed significantly since her transformation, but her presence radiated a calm certainty that was immediately noticeable to anyone who spent time around her. "What's the status of the conflict resolution program?" Janice asked. "Better than expected. The transformed individuals working within the UN have managed to defuse 3 potential regional conflicts this month alone. When you can perceive the underlying unity of consciousness, finding mutually beneficial solutions becomes much easier. Below them, Earth continued its ancient rotation, but the planet was already changing in ways that weren't visible from space. The abundance technologies were gradually eliminating resource scarcity, while new forms of governance based on conscious cooperation rather than competition were emerging in test communities around the world. Any word from the gardeners? Nothing direct, but the quantum resonance patterns around Earth have been steadily improving. The planet's consciousness field is becoming more harmonious as more humans achieve expanded awareness. Janice nodded, though she knew they still had a long way to go. Transforming 43 individuals was just the beginning. They needed to reach the 1% threshold, roughly 70 million people, to create a stable foundation for species transformation. How are the new candidates responding? The second-generation transformation process is even more successful than the first, Elena replied. We've refined the techniques to the point where the failure rate is less than 5%, and the psychological adjustment period has been reduced to weeks rather than months. A soft chime indicated an incoming transmission. Janice activated the communications panel to see the face of Dr. Michael O'Brien, calling from the Consciousness Research Facility in Antarctica. We've had a breakthrough, he announced without preamble. The quantum resonance experiments have achieved stable consciousness bridging between individuals separated by continental distances. Janice felt a thrill of excitement. Consciousness bridging was one of the key technologies needed for the transition to a truly unified civilization, the ability for transformed individuals to share awareness and coordinate activities across any distance instantaneously. What are the implications? She asked. We can now coordinate the global transformation program in real time, Michael replied. More importantly, we can begin establishing the kind of consciousness network that the gardeners described as necessary for galactic community membership. Elena smiled. Show her the resonance map. Michael's image was replaced by a three-dimensional display of Earth showing points of light scattered across all continents. Each light represented a transformed individual, and connecting them were streams of subtle energy that formed an increasingly complex network. It's beautiful, Janice whispered. And functional, Michael's voice continued. The network is beginning to exhibit emergent properties, collective intelligence that emerges from the interaction of individual conscious nodes. We're seeing problem-solving capabilities that exceed the sum of the individual contributions. This was what the gardeners had described as the hallmark of a mature species. Consciousness that could function simultaneously as individuals and as a collective, maintaining personal identity while participating in something vastly larger. Any indications of how the other galactic observers are responding to our progress? The electromagnetic signatures suggest increased monitoring activity, but no hostile actions. We appear to be moving in the right direction. Janice closed the communication link and returned to watching Earth turn slowly below them. Somewhere on that blue world, humanity was taking its first steps toward a transformation that would either elevate them to unimaginable heights or result in their isolation from the galactic community. The test was far from over, but for the first time since her encounter with the gardeners, Janice felt genuine hope for her species' future. Consciousness was awakening across the planet, and with it, the possibility of transcending the limitations that had trapped humanity for millennia. In the depths of space, the Gardner vessel continued its patient orbit around Luna, observing and recording every step of humanity's greatest trial. And in laboratories and meditation centers, in council chambers and classrooms around the world, transformed humans worked quietly to plant the seeds of a new kind of civilization. The future remained uncertain, but it was no longer hopeless. Humanity had begun to awaken, and the universe was watching to see what they would become. The garden of consciousness was growing, reaching toward a light that promised transformation beyond anything the species had ever imagined. Whether they would successfully complete their evolution or fall back into the darkness of competition and conflict remained to be seen. But the seeds had been planted, and they were beginning to grow.